Today, we will discuss such an important aspect, what theism and atheism are, and what theism and atheism mean in the Vedic worldview. Let's start with the most important point. The Chaitanya Charitamrita states that the belief that by serving Lord Krishna, a person will fulfill all their duties and destinies and achieve the highest perfection is the foundation of Vaishnava atheism. Now let's discuss atheism. So atheism is in essence the opposite of this statement. Atheism is also a belief, but a belief that there is no God and that the universe is scientific, that I can achieve everything on my own, that there are no laws or limitations in this world that prevent me from acting as I wish. Thus, a person rejects not only the entire harmony of being, God, the universe, the laws of karma, and the laws of physics and chemistry, but also rejects their own nature. From this, one can conclude that atheism is a profound form of ignorance. And as we know from the sacred scriptures, from the Bhagavad Gita, passion, goodness, and ignorance can manifest in different states. Just because a person is educated and knowledgeable does not mean that they have attained spiritual knowledge and spiritual perception. This means that a person possessing some knowledge may not necessarily be able to apply it in practice, nor has that knowledge made their heart better, more compassionate, kinder, more loving, and so on. Therefore, when we talk about ignorance, we need to understand that ignorance can exist in various forms. Experience shows us that entire civilizations, whole countries, continents, and empires have remained in ignorance for some time, as their leaders engaged in wars and actions that are called self-destruction, meaning they effectively destroyed their own cultures, countries, peoples, and their own lives. Therefore, there is a concept known as self-destruction. This happens when a person immerses themselves in ignorance, alcohol, drugs, madness, passion, and anger. And this means that a person who possesses true knowledge must at least subdue their senses and transcend self-destruction. Not only must he transcend the so-called negative state of consciousness, but he must also move into a positive state where love, reciprocity, empathy, and a connection with all beings and every living creature exist as a part of the creation of Lord Krishna. This state of consciousness is called enlightenment. The Vedas are systematic and holistic knowledge, and the Vedic sages not only understood the highest spiritual sciences and disciplines, but also had a profound understanding of how these principles operate in the realms of physics and chemistry. Believing that knowledge should be unified, it is impossible to fully understand physics without understanding spiritual principles. It is also impossible to fully grasp chemistry without recognizing that chemistry is merely the physical processes occurring in various substances. Therefore, physics and chemistry are at least interconnected. And if this being exists, then it is related to, for example, biology or medicine or cosmology and so on. Therefore, only by understanding everything in its entirety can a person have a sufficiently complete view of reality. And the depth of this perspective is determined by the level of consciousness, because the same postulates can be expressed by a child, or the same postulates can be expressed by a professor. The difference between these personalities is fundamental: experience, understanding, awareness, and all of this is called realized knowledge. Therefore, when we talk about atheism, we also understand that there are different stages of atheism, and the Vedic religion does not deny atheism at all. Atheism is a part of our revolutionary process, which is why the Vedas have never denied atheism. Moreover, in the Vedas, there are very advanced atheists such as Ashtavakra, who wrote the Ashtavakra Gita. Essentially, being a disabled person, he became a great yogi and described the first atheistic teaching, which states that external religious and social norms of existence are merely conventions. If a person does not follow the path of deep self-awareness, this may seem like a very atheistic statement at first, but in reality, it holds the greatest meaning. The essence is not about whether you superficially believe that God exists or does not exist, or whether you believe that this world exists or does not exist. In fact, if you do not perceive this world properly, it does not exist for itself. You can sit in your room, in your shell, in your internet, in your space, and interact only with the reality that is around you. Therefore, the understanding of God is primarily rooted in indeed building a relationship with Him and with His creation in a world of love and service. Atheism is egocentrism and the exploitation of divine resources for personal selfish goals. Although among atheists, there are quite a few so-called altruists or socialists who act for the good of society. Nevertheless, not seeing the deep connections between society, nature, and the cosmos, as well as between the cosmos and God, these individuals act according to what can be termed ignorant paths of goodness. For example, they firmly believe that they must indeed fight against immigrants who come to their country to earn money, yet they seem to have no compassion for people who lack material opportunities. We should not just talk about expanding opportunities for people around the world so that they do not have to come to us, but can have the same opportunities in their own countries. Let's help them. Therefore, all these forms of political and social understanding, right, left, conservatives, are nothing more than relative forms of temporary existence in the material world. And we do not deny these forms and dogmas of how a particular society lives, because one way or another, society must exist according to certain principles. All we can say is that only a deep understanding of God and a connection with Him can make us view the world from a divine perspective and understand its nature. And if we adopt this viewpoint, the world will become harmonious. We will see that there is no such thing as unjust good or unjust evil, and that everything flows harmoniously. But this does not mean that we would want to side with evil simply because evil is harmonious. Evil is harmonious as it manifests the free will of a living being and a rejection of love and harmony, leading to egoism. Therefore, if we promote ourselves from an egoistic point of view, we will be forced, in one way or another, to become part of evil. Perhaps we are just the inactive part of evil. For example, we say, I do nothing bad to anyone, but that does not mean we are doing something good for anyone. And when we say, I do no harm to anyone, it does not mean that by our inaction we do not commit evil. For example, if we are sitting on a bench by the river and see a person drowning, and we do not attempt to help them at all, it is quite obvious that, according to the law, we would be held accountable for this, because as a law-abiding citizen, we were obligated to try to save them, call for an ambulance, lifeguards, and so on. Inaction and passivity are not justifiable for us in this sense, in any way at all. We should not only refrain from doing anything wrong, but we must actively walk the path of truth. And it is only because many thinking people remain inactive in this world that the world becomes a refuge for evil and terror. This is what we see happening now in many countries. But a person may say, I am weak, I have no abilities, I can only remain silent. Perhaps on the external level, in certain circumstances, we have no other options. But this does not mean that we cannot pray for all living beings as the saints do. It does not mean that we cannot develop spiritually to rise above the influence of lower concepts. And this does not mean that we cannot make a choice, although that choice may be very difficult. There was a famous film about an Austrian Christian who lived on a farm in the mountains. He publicly refused to participate in the war. Ultimately, in the end, he was under immense pressure to take back his words and ultimately glorify Hitler. They promised to forgive him because it was no longer a matter of his personal choice, but rather a question of public opinion. But he said that he has a certain conscience, faith in God, and cannot violate his principles. Thus he was beheaded. This case shows that a person preferred the death of their ideals over the death of their physical body. If religion in this world truly functioned as it should, ideally, this person would have been declared a saint, for a saint is someone who lives and acts for their ideals. A film was made about him, and thus we learned about this story. It is a true story. This indicates that throughout the entire existence, spiritual and religious people have faced resistance from society. But this does not mean that religious people do not commit terrible sins. We also know that religion, in general, has greatly compromised itself, and these religious fanatics engage in endless wars. These religious fanatics try to reject other religions. Many reasonable people say, I don't want anything to do with religion, I'm not against God, I'm not against believers, but look at how they behave, look at what they actually do under the guise of noble slogans. It is also important to understand that there is duplicity on the side of atheists, not sincere atheists, meaning those who are not genuinely misguided, but rather people who seek a convenient platform for their selfish activities, justifying their selfish actions. And the same materialists accept religion in order to find justification for their selfish activities. Now let's return to what true theism is. True theism is not just a belief in some higher being, like a spaghetti monster, or that there might be something out there. No, true theism is the search for the beautiful reality of Lord Krishna. This is what Siddhar Maharaj said. We seek happiness, love, and harmony. And this happiness, love, and harmony must have a personal beginning, a personal source, and personal relationships. And thus, God is undoubtedly multifaceted and infinite. He manifests as the superconsciousness of Brahman, as Paramatma, the atomic consciousness in the heart of every living being. However, he is also known as Purushottama, and the supreme person whom the Vedas call Bhagavan. That is, he is the one who is capable of entering into a relationship with you. In the movie The Matrix, the neo-hero converses with the architect of the universe. This person has a certain charismatic personality, smile, and qualities. What matters is not what he says, but how he says it. There is a friendly conversation between them, and this conversation is structured on the principle of father and son, or student and teacher, and he gradually reveals his design to Neo, the main character. Neo chooses a specific pill. He chooses a certain path. He is warned that this is an alternative path, yet he continues on this path and ultimately comes face to face with the architect. I will say, then we are trying to subordinate the world to our lower egoistic nature. God owes nothing to anyone. And the confirmation of the existence of God is the confirmation of the existence of this world. A person in ignorance may say that there is no God, asking for proof, but someone might respond that millions of people communicate with him every day, each at their own level. And if it were not for him, throughout all of existence and creation, there would be such a vast number of religions, a vast number of saints, yogis, mystics, and atheists who have written books. Yes, such a vast number of atheists who, at a certain stage in their lives, also confessed that they were atheists, that they were in ignorance, but then they found some connection and faith. Therefore, the question of understanding God is exclusively based on faith, because faith compels us to accept the obvious, while the absence of faith leads us to reject the obvious. Someone might say, look, there is no sun because of the clouds, but someone else might say, well, because there is light, it means there is a source of light, which is the sun, but I can't see him because of the clouds. That's fine, but when the cloud clears, perhaps you will see him. And it has simply set on the horizon, it will appear again. Ah, well, when it appears, then I will look at it. In other words, the arguments for and the absence of God are merely, so to speak, our reflection, the way we see the world. And as a rule, we do not see the world through our own eyes. There are people who inspire us towards certain doctrines, and this begins from early childhood. But an exception to the rule is people who possess a certain inner spiritual self-awareness, such as Prahlad Maharaj, for example. He was born into a family of demons, but his father, the demon Hiranyakashipu, hired very atheistic, materialistic teachers for him, who possessed knowledge of many subtle sciences and phenomena of this material world, allowing him, as the heir to the throne, to gain power, strength, and status. But Prahlada rejected such education. He said that this education, so to speak, political, social, and scientific, merely diverts a person from their own nature and their relationship with God. Therefore, on one hand, the education that we see now can undoubtedly expand the scope of our professional and sensory activities. But does this education lead to a connection with the world, with the universe, with harmony? Of course not. Indeed, in this regard, atheism itself is a certain state of society, a state of ignorance, even as society supposedly progresses. But we understand that no technologies, no devices can help a person experience the true inner happiness and bliss that is contained within their soul. Moreover, the device itself is merely a conduit for a certain energy and specific ideas. We can spend whole days scrolling through Instagram, where there are beautiful girls, TikTok, where there are funny videos. But this will not bring us the happiness and satisfaction that we seek deep in our hearts. Unattractive girls and unfunny things on TikTok cannot satisfy our hearts, but they can satisfy our eyes, our mind, which constantly craves dopamine, some sensations. And thus we understand that we are not being fed thoughts now, but we are being fed sensations. Therefore, in advertising, any poisons, alcohol, or drugs can be linked to visual sensations, to the image of a beautiful person, or to the image of a state of happiness. Pour this liquid into a beautiful bottle and show that it is consumed by very successful people, and they truly experience a kind of noble and deeply state of happiness. And the bottle, you can write in some letters, alcohol is harmful to your health. Nevertheless, we see that this is, to some extent, a substitution of concepts, and thus Confucius always said, indeed, always look at the concepts and their content. Very often in this world, some concepts lack substance. For example, poison is offered in a beautiful bottle labeled medicine. On the contrary, a medicine may grow in your garden without any label, but this plant could save your life or give you vitality. In this regard, a person must always walk the path of recognizing the truth. Essentially, in India, atheism is one of the facets of the search. The Vedas do not deny atheism. There are even entire religions, such as Buddhism, that essentially speak of the existence of emptiness. That is to say, the absence, so to speak, of the material as the ultimate goal of human life. But even to reach this emptiness, which, from the perspective of Buddhists, is filled with happiness because it is immaterial. In other words, it is essentially a denial of everything material. A person must follow dharma. A person must adhere to certain principles, laws, and inner steps. Only by reaching a certain level of consciousness can a person grasp this truth. In essence, even the atheistic forms of religion that exist in the Vedas call upon individuals to transition to a stage of direct experience and enlightenment. Only in this state can a person make a certain choice, just as we do not allow children to make choices. Because children do not possess consciousness, although they may watch some adult movies and play with certain adult toys like cars, or business games such as Monopoly, they are not capable of making the right choices at their level of consciousness. Therefore, essentially, the Vedas state that a person must grow, and it grows through the fulfillment of duty. Therefore, there also exists the duty of an atheist, the duty of a materialist, the duty to the homeland, the duty to the family, and the duty to the country. And, as a rule, atheists think that religion is morality. It is merely morality. It is just certain forms of duty. But the deeper a person penetrates into the nature of divine consciousness, the more he sees the divine's penetration into every sphere of our existence, the more his understanding of duty changes in a perfect way. And ultimately, he realizes that God is not just a source of certain laws and postulates that allow society to function and exist harmoniously. God is the source of love, beauty, and harmony. This is where the consciousness of Krishna begins. Because when we talk about the principles of religion, they actually duplicate each other in different languages and forms. So to speak, do not kill, do not steal, treat others as you would like to be treated, and so on. But these are merely external postulates of religion. Deep practice of love for God involves glorifying His holy name, meditating on His divine forms and deeds. And God has many different divine forms and deeds, and accordingly there are also many forms of meditation. But ultimately, a person, he can come to two states. Either he moves along the impersonal path and realizes that God is the source of the highest consciousness, believing that he himself is a part of the divine and is trying to merge with this divine being. This is called the teaching of Mayavada, going beyond Maya on one hand, but on the other hand, it is also Maya, because a person is not the source of everything. The source of everything is the Lord. The second is Bhakti, which is the search for a relationship with God in His personal, most beautiful, perfect and sweet form. And in this state, he seeks the opportunity for relationships and service. Both Mayavada and the philosophy of the Bhagavata, as well as the Vedas, are essentially very similar to each other, but they fundamentally differ in their higher meaning. In Mayavada, the focus is more on self-improvement and achieving enlightenment, while in Bhakti, the emphasis is on how a person, by renewing their lost connections with God, attains enlightenment based on the extent of that renewal. Enlightenment is not the main goal of Bhakti practice. Enlightenment is a byproduct. In the fullest sense, the very practice of love and relationships with God is the main goal. Therefore, anyone who has attained a relationship with the Supreme Being, with Lord Krishna, naturally acquires the higher forms of enlightenment that are discussed in the personal philosophy. Therefore, in Hinduism, there are many different groups of practitioners, such as various different sects and traditions. Practicing atheists are generally referred to as jnanists, Buddhists, and impersonalists. Again, among them, there are many different gradations. Some believe in complete emptiness, while others believe that the path of the Buddha is the path of good deeds, being more inclined towards karma. Nevertheless, this vast palette of Indian meditative atheists exists, and in essence, never has open hostility or confrontation with the devotees. Devotees who practice bhakti do not condemn personalists or Buddhists. They simply oppose their ideas. They say that behind emptiness lies fullness, and behind bliss lies love in personal relationships. In other words, they essentially take these concepts and deepen them. And if you start to follow the logic of those who adhere to the Bhakti school, you will indeed see that their line of thought is very extremely rational. It is not rational from a mathematical perspective, but it is rational from the perspective of the very nature of a living being, seeking love, relationships, harmony, and so on. And since this thought is harmonious, the idea is harmonious. It captivates our heart and our being more deeply, like any more harmonious idea. However, this does not mean that all living beings are at the same stage of evolution. A living being has freedom, the freedom to believe, the freedom not to believe, the freedom to practice a religion, the freedom not to practice a religion. Moreover, religions are also divided into states of ignorance, passion, goodness, and transcendental religion. Therefore, in every religion, there are saints who have transcended the gravity of the ideas and canons defined by the secret religion. Essentially, all genuine practitioners look to them as their guides. Genuine practitioners do not rely on the administration of any particular church or temple, nor on any fees for religious rituals or candles and so on. But for ignorant people, religion, as one of the characters said, is the opium of the people. For ignorant people, religion blinds and controls. Because a person does not understand the essence of religion or its meaning, but since a religious faith lives within him in a certain nascent form, He submits to religion, thinking that to be a scholar, one simply needs to believe in science, but there is no necessity to study any subjects or learn. What a funny postulate. Just believe in science. And most people do just that. They actually believe in science and trust everything their scientists tell them. We clearly understand that in today's society, science is an absolutely biased and politicized affair that pushes any injections, diseases, and purely political realities. That is to say, there are not many sincere scientists in science itself. As a rule, they are burned, like Giordano Bruno, so to speak, by propagandist scientists. And we often see that the role of scientists is played by people who, so to speak, have absolutely no education or experience. And in today's reality, we see that true scientists are simply pushed aside, while some pseudo-paid scientists emerge who, so to speak, flaunt concepts. It is happening in the US Senate, where certain, so to speak, figures who are causing blockades or lockdowns are asked if they have a scientific education, and they say no, but that doesn't matter. One should not think that science and atheism are not used, so to speak, by dark forces to assert their realities in this world, just as religion is. We know that the best infiltration of the enemy is the infiltration of the headquarters of their opponent. Therefore, one should not think that in this world, religion is not captured by materialists, demons, and atheists. It is also captured. And someone might say, what should we do if science is taken over by atheists and materialists, and religion is also dominated by materialists and atheists? The answer is only one: to seek the truth. And the main point is that a person who seeks the truth, regardless of whether they come to science or to religion, the truth itself, the very search for truth, will lead them to the light. An amazing thing, yes, is that once you enter the cave, you can take one path or another, but in any case, wandering in the cave, if you seek the light, the source of light will reveal itself to you. In this regard, there is a very good principle that people born in darkness, in a cave, always illuminated, so to speak, the cave with the help of a torch. But one day, one of them found the sun, and he invited his friends, saying, I have found the source of light. They said, okay, let's go there, we need torches. Where I am leading you, there is no need for torches. And then they stopped believing him. They said, you are a madman. How can one see in this world without a torch? Perhaps the road to this source of light must be with a torch. But when we step into a world illuminated by the sun, with its beauty, love, and warmth, we then understand that the torch is our mind. It is our experience. He is not needed in this world of pure consciousness. In this regard, it should be remembered that very often science is merely an empirical method of repeating the same action in order to accumulate experimental data. For example, if we drop an object and it constantly falls, we establish the principle that there is a science of gravity, for instance. But as soon as we change the environment, the object can rise up. Magnetic fields, or the place where this occurs. We can say that this is an anomalous place. One way or another, as a great physicist from NASA said, he stated that scientists do not analyze the data as carefully. That is, there are always different circumstances in which substance or matter can behave in the opposite way. If we talk about how to incorporate faith and spirituality, as well as spiritual science, we understand that behind the foundation of matter and substance lies consciousness. And consciousness exists within the frameworks of the algorithms of consciousness itself. Here, quantum physics comes to our aid, which states that there is an original particle that is unpredictable. Then these particles can connect into chains, undergo various reactions, whether physical or chemical, but this can already be predicted. The longer the duration of these reactions, the more likely we can make some predictions. This is very similar to stock markets or stacks, which can be analyzed to a certain extent using an understanding of certain algorithms and charts. But sometimes, due to certain energetic states, lunar eclipses, panic, or political news, these stocks can behave unpredictably. That is, they follow certain trends, and it is possible to identify them. But at some point, something happens, and it breaks away from the general trend. Therefore, we understand that the consciousness of people such as panic has influenced this price. Panic consciousness is fear. Fear lowers the price. Conversely, panic desire for profit immediately drives people to frantically buy something. And we see that essentially people often act completely emotionally. And so the decision of whether I believe in God or do not believe in God, whether I like it or do not like it, is made emotionally. But the question arises, what is the nature of our emotions? Where does emotion come from? And where does the world of emotions originate? If the world of emotions is simply algorithms of this material world, then so to speak, that is one point of view. Dead, lifeless matter suddenly produces some emotions, But if we understand that emotions are a state of consciousness, this is a quality of consciousness. Simply put, emotion can be transformed through matter, resulting in material emotion, material fear, and material panic. However, it is possible that emotions have some underlying cause. For example, fear exists in the spiritual world, but it is not as frightening because there is no need to sell and buy anything to survive in the spiritual realm. So fear is just one facet of love. For example, the fear of losing a beloved, or desire, some greed, an aspiration, perhaps a greedy aspiration to bring satisfaction. Thus, this emotion can exist without a market algorithm in the spiritual world, but in the material world, this state of being, transformed through the conditioned consciousness of living beings, can create such entire fluctuations. And when I say market fluctuations, it should be understood that these are not just, so to speak, some numbers on a screen, and these are indeed entire crises, whole social upheavals, entire empires that can collapse solely due to the absence or presence of faith, or a shift in the paradigm of faith. Therefore, since society is also dynamic, it is constantly changing, spiritual knowledge is also dynamic, and spiritual atheistic knowledge is transforming within society as well, just like atheism. Atheism has existed as long as God has existed. That is, there are individuals who have always rejected and denied him. And for various reasons, there are many individuals who feel offended by God and believe that God has treated them unfairly. For example, they were born as disadvantaged colleagues, or they lack certain opportunities. And there are individuals who demonically challenge God and declare themselves a new God, Lucifer, who brings color from their perspective. There are many such individuals in the world today, and they generally dominate over ordinary people. Why? Because they also chose for themselves the divine principle of evil, as it is more easily attainable in this world, you understand, right? If good and evil are equal, then they say, we have chosen the side of evil, because evil is obvious and seems just, and therefore we act justly. But your goodness, it is incomprehensible. It involves compassion, some kind of love. These are very subjective algorithms, but evil, that is, understandable. You act according to the principles of evil, you act according to the principles of the system, and you quickly achieve success. You believe in some God who does not intervene in this world, while we believe in a God, in Satan, who intervenes in this world. And he is actively tempting here and actively working, so to speak. He is also actively, as they say, paying his supporters, not with some ephemeral notions of love, harmony, and goodness, nor with promises of eternal life, but with real life, here and now. You will become an official, you will become a businessman, you will become rich, and you will become a star. All you need to do is simply worship evil sincerely. Without even understanding how it works, it doesn't matter. And for some people, such an idea seems extremely, let's say, attractive, because an atheist, in essence, does not stand on any position. He essentially renounces everything. Perhaps he is even an agnostic. But the atheist Satanist takes an active position opposing God. And not only does he take this active position, but is attracted to a certain energetic egregore, which provides him with the realization of what he exists for in the material world. Living beings have come into this material world to enjoy and to control, and therefore such atheistic Satanism is a quite powerful form of satisfying one's senses and needs, which is why a large number of people practice it either secretly or openly. But again, it is important to understand that we are still creating the antitheses of God. Regardless, even if we do everything the opposite way, we still arrive at the idea that we must be devoted to a fascist or some atheistic ideology. We must make sacrifices because this is the principle of accepting the higher energy, giving something, and so on. Therefore, if a person begins to deeply analyze their nature and the nature of the surrounding world, they will understand that they possess a spiritual nature, a divine nature. I am not inclined to act against harmony, nor to block the sun and stars, to climb into the box of my thoughts and concepts, or to join any group of rebellious souls. Although there may be a considerable number of these rebellious souls, I am inclined towards the pursuit of love, beauty, harmony, and communication with like-minded individuals. Yes, I want to live in a harmonious, perfect society, in a harmonious, perfect world. I do not want to be the king of hell and be just another middle-level demon there, receiving my diamonds as a reward for tormenting sinners, even if it might bring me some pleasure. One way or another, what I have just shared with you about atheism is likely not what someone expected to hear, because this topic can be analyzed in many ways, and different aspects of atheism can be discussed and compared. However, one way or another, we have understood one thing. Either there is absolute faith and a connection with the love, beauty, and harmony created by Lord Krishna, or there is a neutral position where we can so to speak, bury our heads like an ostrich in the sand for a while and ignore certain realities. Alternatively, it is like living and existing on the side of dark forces, where there may also be a career, worship, and perhaps some success or results over a period of time. But there is no such love, no such harmony. Bulgakov has a book called The Master and Margarita, where we begin to empathize with the Master and Margarita. Margarita ultimately becomes a witch and the companion of the devil. She, so to speak, acquires certain mystical perfections and manifests as a dark feminine goddess. Kali, as described in the Vedas, as a certain embodiment of her. Bulgakov's book ends with the idea that there exists a certain world of good and evil, and some individuals have consciously chosen the world of evil, and in this world of evil, they have received some good for themselves. Holland is indeed kind to his companions like a master. They serve him and even derive some pleasure from it. He lovingly accepts his devotees. For someone like Margarita, yes, indeed he makes some concessions. By the way, he is extremely devout, because he asserts to such an atheist that you cannot even imagine how you will end this life and how suddenly it can happen. In this regard, the devil does not seem to be such a bad figure after all. Indeed, this is a certain official from the Ministry of Dark Affairs who allows souls to manifest their lower nature. Therefore, from this perspective, we can say that everything is subordinate to God. There is simply the will of God where living beings can take opposition, but from this perspective, the opposition is also controlled by the Supreme Being in the form of Lord Shiva. Why? Because in the Vedic scriptures, Lord Shiva holds a very powerful position. He is not just one of the gods, he is God, but in a specific aspect. And very often people call Paul a god, but they do not understand that this is a manifestation of God in a certain aspect. And in this particular aspect, he provides refuge to all fallen souls, including the dark forces, and controls them. However, Lord Krishna is not associated with demons. He is extremely interested in pure souls who are attracted to the beauty and harmony of the spiritual world, and his relationships are more profound with them than the relationship of Lord Shiva with spirits, ghosts, demons, and so on. And we will see that the sweetness of Lord Krishna is such that it is close to every person when he becomes the child of his mother Yashoda, when he dances with the gopis, and when he plays with his friends. We see that Lord Krishna embodies to the highest degree the very nature of the love that we seek. But there is always someone who indeed likes that dark art, some kind of necrophilic music, some form of Satanism, because this negative energy also attracts a person, and his nature of ignorance cannot escape. It indeed gives him such an impulse. That is why, after listening to such a lecture, you must come to a conclusion about which side you want to live and act on. In other words, you can maintain neutrality while being an atheist. You can embark on the path of faith, then you will have to interact with believers, with Vaishnavas. Or if you are perhaps indeed interested in exploiting this world in a more crude form, you can take the dark path. And on this dark path, you may achieve some temporary positive result. But in this world, everything comes at a cost, and that is the first point. The second, it is indeed impossible to transform this world without adhering to a specific paradigm. And even if you become a Satanist, you will still have to perform some satanic rituals. If you are a superficial religious believer, you will still be urged to go to church on Sundays. If you become a Vaishnava, you will still have to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and practice certain Vaishnava principles. Therefore, in this world, as Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, it is impossible to remain inactive. And Lord Krishna also explains that everyone acts according to a certain nature, the nature of this world, the nature of their karma, the nature of their soul, and the level of evolution at which they are. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna is very liberal, explaining all these things. And he tells Arjuna to think about where he is, at what stage, and to make his choice. Once you make your choice, you begin to act within one paradigm or another. That is why we talked about atheism, not to offend or refute the ideas of atheism, or to belittle these people, or to show that there is something worse than atheism. Atheism is a path to godlessness, to Satanism, and vice versa. It has been shown that in the Vedas, atheism is accepted as a certain evolutionary stage of humanity. The Lord gives a person the opportunity not to believe, but at the same time, he also provides the chance, through a certain freedom of the soul, to determine which path they want to take. Thank you very much.